G'day guys, Mike with the Outer Circle. So, some interesting comments on the last video, such as, this has nothing to do with 2.0, despite talking about the release cycle and the way content has been drip-fed. Apparently that isn't enough to do with the game itself. No problem, I was already sitting on a small pile of notes for part 2, which was planned for Wednesday, but for the sake of not leaving people hanging, I'm moving it up to Monday, which brings you here. This isn't going to be nice, positive, happy, any of that. This, like the last one, is looking at the state of things, and if something is in a bad state, we have to say it. That's how honesty works. Omitting the issues for fear of offending people is not what I believe good content creation is. For the people who call this channel negative, it's about 6 positive or neutral videos to each negative. So if you're in the comments on this one calling me always negative at this point, you're doing so willingly and willfully from a place of deliberate ignorance, so don't expect me to respond. So the game itself, how is it playing currently? That's down to how much of a prick the other player is. Honestly, so much of this game is now about bait and switch, thanks to the poorly implemented reaction mechanic, which you knew I was going to mention. Well, let's start there because I will die on that hill. Reactions are something I haven't liked from the start. Many that use them say they are not that bad, but for myself, I found them a miserable half step between player turns versus I go, you go, unit by unit systems. Because of the fact they feel like a slapped on mechanic, which the game wasn't based around, it has led to some real extremes of power levels. Assault reactions, for example, often feel a little underwhelming, not really that powerful, but there are a few exceptions. Movement ones, on the other hand, can be quite strong, like any movement mechanic, but they require great timing and a smart player to really pull the full advantage out of them. Then, well, we get to shooting. And this can be shooting reactions that are in the shooting phase, but also ones that take place in the assault and movement phases. Because shooting. Shooting reactions are, in theory, limited to a maximum of 3. Practically in most games, you only get 2 in the shooting phase. But as you would probably know, there are interceptor reactions, which take place in the movement phase, and there are overwatch reactions, which take place in the assault phase. So that's now up to at least 5 shooting reactions per turn. Oh, but then there is war gear, such as augury scanners, which permit a unit free interceptor reactions without using up any of the 3 reaction pool allocation. So you get 1 reaction for intercept in your movement phase, plus 1 free intercept for each unit with an augury scanner, up to 3 shooting reactions, plus an overwatch reaction on top of all of that. There are units able to fire 3 times in the opposing player turn. How on earth can anyone conceivably call that balanced? Again, I'll state it so that it's crystal clear for the people who insist on arguing the point with me. Augury scanners do not use up your reaction pool, nor do they count towards the advanced reaction allocation for the turn. Look them up, page 140 of the Liber Astartes books if you don't believe me. On top of the augury scanner, there is also the helical targeting array, which Contemptors and Derrideos have access to, which gives them their own free intercept rule, plus Skyfire. Thanks to this system being clearly slapped on by shonky writers, whom this sometimes stupid community is all too willing to forgive for their egregious errors, there is no real cap on a unit performing these reactions. Shooting is so powerful in 2.0 that people often avoid taking part in shooting so that they do not trigger a reaction from the other player. What kind of gameplay is that? Don't participate in a phase because the other guy can shoot you back with 0 consequence or counterplay? Yeah, fucking brilliant design right there. Apologists for the system say it represents a unit coming under attack. You know, they're firing a panic magazine in return. But, well, since when does a panic mag fire at full ballistic skill with the ability to select targets, rope a friendly unit in on the action sometimes, and then do it multiple times in a turn? Someone is landing a drop pod? Oh, let's mag dump them. The survivors get out and fire at you? Shoot back. No penalty either. And, hey, there's one thing I know from my real military career, it's points that when you're ambushed, that's when you think clearest and you respond most effectively. Definitely not when you're the one doing ambushing, don't be silly. Then, the last pitiful dregs of the unit try to charge you, and you shoot them some more. Endless magazines, like a 1980s action hero. Just fire that machine gun from the hip until you never run out of bullets because you're a 1980s action hero. Hell, finish the turn with a one-liner. Haha, erase that guy. Do not disturb my friend, he's dead tired. Buzzsaw, he had to split. Consider that a divorce. If the game lets a unit shoot in the opposing phase, that should be a once per turn thing. I cannot believe I have to spell this out, but you have a shooting option available for each player, for each unit, each turn. That shooting action is being brought forward when you perform a reaction. You're using it early, and it's a calculated trade-off, like the old interceptor rule. You fire now, but know that if you do, you cannot fire later because you're reloading, you're letting the weapon cool, whatever. It's a balancing thing. There's a trade-off for it to stop it snowballing. It would be the same if it was close combat. Imagine if there was a reaction in the game which was like, hey, the other player gets to fight an extra assault phase, but you don't. You would all immediately be like, oh, what the hell, that's so broken, wouldn't you? But you let it happen in shooting. Because you're fucking idiots. Spoilers, it isn't. Shooting is the most powerful phase in the game currently thanks to morale modifiers, pinning, and the ability to stop other units reacting if you pin them. The ability to remove high threat enemies with no recourse on their end, etc. So, that's a problem. Now that we've discussed reactions and that they are botched from the get-go by terrible writing, which shouldn't be defended by anyone at this point, can we finally get some community consensus on them and ask for a rewrite from Games Workshop? No? Okay, there's still a large group of people who think it's fine to have 3 shooting phases in one turn. Never mind then. It seems the community is full of fucking idiots who can justify anything. Let's move on to something more constructive, the psychic phase. This one they mostly got it right, and that's great to see. I would have preferred a reaction mechanic here, of all places, for using powers and denying them. It's probably the most logical phase to do it in, and it's actually the area that therefore makes the most sense for me to use it. But instead, we end up with a mostly balanced phase. However, it does tend to get overpowered on certain characters who are able to use a lot of abilities and stack multiple disciplines. Thousand Sons characters are the only reason that a particular force, in their case, is actually saved from the trash can, because I think they're otherwise irredeemable as a force. Speaking of which, power scale of the factions. Let's talk overall factions, and then we'll look at sub-factions. So, the most powerful overall factions are the Custodes, usually having all the tools required for every job and only limited by their model count. Astartes, of course, are next. They have all the tools like Custodes do, but are generally weaker in power. After Marines is probably the Mechanicum, but they're really a shadow of their former selves. Anything with solid shooting and night fight remains viable, but the change to the weapon skill table has made them slap Marines with pillows in close combat. Now, Sisters of Silence, Imperial Knights, Assassins, also undercooked as fighting forces that almost every force is going to be identical, so hardly worth ranking them at all, which leaves Solar Auxilia as the bottom placed faction currently until something happens with Militia or Demons of the Ruin Storm, we actually see their rules. A weapon skill 3 army in a minimum weapon skill 4 world with armor which cannot hold up to the majority of the weapons which got buffed this edition, which is everything AP4, heavy bolters got more shots, Gravis weapons came into being, all this means that their infantry die in droves. Since vehicles got worse, morale got worse, and since night fighting is happening in turn 1 in 5 out of 6 games, the one thing the army has, semi-decent shooting, is negated in the opening turn, leaving them with just turn 2 to stop the enemy because turn 3 will see the charges happening. The army is botched, badly written, and the writers have some very big fucking balls to stare us in the eyes and pretend they did a good job. Don't try and defend it, community. I've been watching my friends play a lot of games with them, and also, I myself have been playing for almost 30 years, and I can tell just by reading the book what is and isn't correctly balanced. There will always be that one guy in the comments who justifies it. I took Solar Auxilia, and I beat an Imperial Fist army, and you know what? Then a supermodel came over after the game, sucked my dick, and I even won the lottery. We're all happy for you, pal. Don't let the comments hit you on the way out. For sub-factions, the legions. This is simple. All legions scale in power based on what units you take. The very worst legions, Raven Guard, Salamanders, Thousand Suns, suddenly get much better when you spam more Dagon, Pyroclast, and Psychic HQs respectively. But there are other factions, the top end, Imperial Fists, Iron Warriors, Dark Angels, who have all of the tools out the gate. And they don't need to min-max to do it. So when they do min-max, they leap ahead on the power scale. This means that you find yourself really limited in list building based on Legion. If you want to be able to play a force which stands a chance of winning in all situations, if you play Raven Guard for instance, you don't take the more Dathan, Dark Furies, Nemesis Bolt Gun Arm units. Let's see how your game goes. There may as well not be any other units in the book at that point because after Dreadnoughts they're out of options. There are also insane cases of Legions getting it all, where you see Legions get so much, you have to think it's biased. I'll use my favourite point maker here, the Imperial Fists, and I'll contrast them to the Raven Guard because I've had Raven Guard players tell me how good they are. So traits wise, all Imperial Fists with all bolt and auto weapons, which is 2/3 of all the shooting in the game, get +1 on there to hit roll. This does affect Overwatch, for people telling me it doesn't, because it's not a ballistic skill modifier, it's a dice roll modifier, there's a difference. This means things like snipers hit on 2s. Raven Guard on the other hand, have a series of effects based on what type of unit you are. Infiltrating for infantry, shredding for assault marines and dark furies, which are units which already come with shredding weapons, so well written rules right there. Their vehicles get +1 to shrouding, except vehicles cannot use shrouded, nor can fearless units like their specifically shrouded Primarch, so almost nothing army-wide. Great. And don't forget, there's a lot more augury scanners out there this edition, and they won't let you infiltrate within 18 inches ever. For Rites of War, Imperial Fists not only get 3, but their ones give their elite units line and additional bonuses. The Raven Guard, they have one that gives them preferred enemy against characters, and only independent characters, and reduces their heavy support choices, the most useful slot in the game. And their other Rite of War is one that relies on taking Imperial Army allies, which we have already established are awful. War Gear, Raven Guard can take a camo cloak on independent characters for +1 cover save, as well as improvisers which give them night fighting, but they take blind tests at -1. And lastly, they have lightning cores, which slightly are boosted in their killing potential. The Imperial Fists, on the other hand, get assault cannons, which benefit from their Legion trait and hit on 2s. They have storm shields for 3+ invulnerable saves, and they have Solar Power Gauntlets, which is an always strength 10 Power Fist equivalent. This is what I'm talking about when I say some legions have it all. The Raven Guard, they're sifting through the floor for a slightly better weapon over like lightning cores, for example. Whereas Imperial Fists like, yeah, we got a shooting weapon, we got a close combat weapon, and we have a defensive item. Oh, we've got one in every category. That's pretty good. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, saying this over and over, but some legions, they're just better guys, and therefore other legions are playing catch up on the scale. Imperial Fist Recon Marines are better snipers than Raven Guard Marines. Let that sink in, would you? So yeah, that's the state of the factions. So what about some units? Well, I did a video recently called 2.0 Winners and Losers. Very neutral video where I spoke about this, but in short, in regards to tanks, the best tanks are the ones you never have to see the enemy, such as the Scorpius, whilst other tanks like the Predator have a harder time than ever since the prevalence of anti-tank weapons is higher than ever. And, well, reactions, they can't really utilise them. So you'll see things like Predators foolishly shooting at a Legion Heavy Support Squad only for the Heavy Support Squad to retaliate and kill an entire 5 Predator squadron. I've only seen it happen once this edition, but I can confirm it is possible that it happens. Why? Because it turns out that 10 Iron Warriors las cannons at Ballistic Skill 5, thanks to a Master Signals, put out more hurt than 10 Heavy Bolters and 5 autocannons do, for the record. And in that particular example, it was a turn 1 reaction against a tank army which had first turn. So the Iron Warriors hadn't even played a turn yet, and when they were shot at thanks to their advanced reaction, they got to fire twice with Gets Hot on las cannons. So they put out 20 shots hitting on 2s with their las cannons, of which 3 got hot, which is pretty much perfect averages, didn't kill any of the Iron Warriors, but all of the Predators were destroyed, which cost a lot more points than 10 las cannons. Of course, for every vehicle in a bad place, there's an elite infantry unit that is now in a good one. Cataphracti, basically unkillable because plasma is ruined by yet more bad riding, and so are templates, which I recently demonstrated categorically as being useless. I'm guessing here that a rider, they probably felt that they should be able to walk across an open battlefield without being punished for it, so that's why they changed the rules, because it can't be down to talent. Of course, there's also the brutal rule, which they have wide-reaching access to because you've got things like Thunderhammer spam, a rule definitely not thought of at the last minute and definitely not left out of the main rulebook Universal Special Rules due to its 11th hour inclusion in the game. That takes us to Nemesis bolt guns, snipers, which means they can pick and choose their targets, such as, I don't know, your valuable HQ, and put all of their shots, which rend on 5s and pin, don't forget, into said character. Boy, is it fun to see your sergeants randomly pop, characters pop, apothecaries pop, you name it. Also, since they are, for some reason, 72 inches range, they usually don't get reacted to because their target units don't have the response range. Wow, what a fun and engaging mechanic, and definitely not another example of terrible writing. This, of course, takes us to Contemptors, the ultimate winner in 2.0. Cheap, tough, devastating damage, great at range, great up close, solid save. Unlike vehicle squadrons, wounds are one don't carry over to another out of sympathy. Unlike infantry, they cannot be instant killed. Unlike vehicles, they cannot be shaken or stunned. Unlike infantry, they're fearless. Unlike vehicles, they won't be blown up by a single melter gun. Unlike infantry, fleshbane and poison isn't that great a threat. You can see where I'm going here, right? They also have a Rite of War, which makes one a HQ and the rest into line troops. Joy of joys. Basically, 2 Contemptors at 2,000 points can single-handedly win a game for you. Half a dozen, you'd have to screw up pretty bad or have some ungodly dice rolling to lose that game. Or the other guy has 7 Dreadnoughts. So now we're getting near to the end of the video, and we can start to assemble all of these topics that I've covered, and you can start to see the problem, I hope, without calling it salt because it's fact, with a bit of swearing thrown in there for hyperbole. You have powerful forces, toads, legions, and they have their own sub-hierarchy of power, and on top of that you have certain units which are very powerful and hard to counter. Nemesis snipers and contemptors combined. This is then stacked with reaction spam, and suddenly you find yourself in a place where builds start to head in this direction. I've watched people start out this edition with Predator squadrons and Despoiler squads, and then I've seen them hit the Contemptor wall and bounce off, and then I see those same people with 2 less Predators in their next game and 2 more Contemptors, and then I see their Warlord get sniped, so the next match I see them hiding a kitted out Praetor behind a wall, being functionally useless now, just so he doesn't die. I myself tried a Raven Guard drop pod force and met a wall of Augury scanning interception fire. So little survived the initial deep strike and the overwatching that my own shooting phase, I had to be so calculated to make sure I didn't fire into the wrong thing that I couldn't kill and get reacted to with these drop podding units. It was horrible. The army was unplayable, and that's really what 2.0 currently boils down to. Unplayable. Not for everyone, and not all the time, but as a word, unplayable describes dozens of armies from the last edition. Some armies, like Solar, are unplayable as a whole. I should talk about the weapon skill chart before finishing up, but the fact that weapon skill 3 can only hit weapon skill 4 on 5s means that if 20 Solar Auxilia attack 5 Marines, by the time they hit, they wound, they won't actually kill anyone. And the 5 Marines will actually kill one of them. And that means for those playing at home, just 5 Marines can almost eternally hold up any Solar Auxilia gun unit in perpetuity, within the constraints of luck, because of course all Math Hammer is subject to luck. In theory, in fact, a single Marine can do it if the math is perfect. Now, you can call that more accurate if you like, but I call it bad for gameplay. On the other end of the spectrum, the same weapon skill 4 Marines cannot hit weapon skill 5 Marines on better than 5s. So you all of a sudden see this emphasis on Legion Elite Terminators and Dreadnoughts, which happen to be weapon skill 5, all being pushed further to the forefront of the system. The weapon skill chart should really be kicking in at a negative difference of 2 weapon skill points, not 1. By all means, weapon skill 5 should hit weapon skill 4 on 3s, no problem. But why should weapon skill 4 only hit weapon skill 5 on 5s? That's too extreme and it makes balancing so much harder. So yeah, that's the state of the system. It's a mess. I haven't even spoken about morale bombs, pinning, missions, night fighting, but honestly, do I really need to do a part 3? The game is a mess, with some really rada being required. Nemesis bolt guns need to be dropped to probably 30 inches range. Contemptors, points up significantly, or nerf the toughness / survivability, one or the other. Legion traits and war gear. Well, rewrites are required for at least 3, probably 4, to bring them up to some level of competitive. Namely, Thousand Suns, because their Legion trait is entirely dependent on having a living squad sergeant in a Nemesis bolt gun meta. Salamanders, because their trait only works against flamers, which nobody is ever taking, and it doesn't really do much against them either. It just lowers the dice roll by -1 on their to wound roll against you, in a world where things like melter guns are wounding you on 2s anyway, and they will still instant kill your guy. Raven Guard, of course, as we said, their Legion trait doesn't actually affect 90% of their shit, because bad writing. The White Scars, because +1 movement is great if people know how to use it, but yeah, that's it. Again, there are armies I hit you on 2s with all my shooting, and you're like, cool, I move 1/7 faster than you do. Ooh, oh my. Please stop the power creep. Fix land speeders as well. Did you know land speeders can't even fly over troops anymore, on top of sucking balls? Fix bikes. They need toughness 5, not 2 wounds. All templates need a rework. Artillery firing shells larger than the infantry model they hit probably shouldn't be a regular or even rerollable armor save. AB2 and 3 templates are needed in the game, especially when you're increasing the survivability of Terminators so much this edition by not only removing plasma weapons, but giving the units double the wounds and 0 points adjustment, as well as the ability to reroll armor saves against templates. You've given them 2 to 3 levels of buffs there, as well as nerfing the weapons shooting them. Do you not think that 4 levels of change there requires some readjustment? No, we're going to keep Basilisk the same points, and then I'm going to call the writers bad, and then people in the comments are going to say that I'm unfair when I call the writers bad. Yes, what a thrilling, engaging community. Reactions. I'd say remove them entirely. Rework them to actually work in the game, and then reintroduce them. And it can be as simple as your unit may perform a single shooting reaction in the opposing player's turn. That's it. Don't let a unit intercept, then return fire, then overwatch. That's 3 things in one turn. So drop it to 1. Just drop it to 1. Lastly, for all those grinding their teeth at the sheer audacity of me to create this list of problems, chomping at the bit to insult me in some forum where I cannot respond, I'm going to ask you this. If the system is so healthy, how many events are being run in your area? It should be well up on last edition, since so many people have existing armies. With all this new plastic on the market, there should also be a host of new people getting into it and playing games, right? The community should be bigger than ever, right? I'm certain your Facebook feed is full of work-in-progress images of the new armies, people just non-stop excitedly talking about the legions they're working on. Yeah, I'm being sarcastic because I'm seeing so little of that happening that it's genuinely concerning. For all the talk of how good 2.0 is, which I think is hot air, people just aren't playing it. Anecdotal? Sure, but now is your chance in the comments to prove me wrong. You can tell me all about how your community is thriving. Reactions are great, there's a huge variety in the armies. Contemptors aren't a problem. I'm all ears. While you're at it, let me know how easy it is for you to buy all the products at the moment, because I'm sure you can easily get a hold of power armor, right? Right? Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. This is not the kind of episode I like creating, but it's a bit cathartic. It's a bit of an old school Outer Circle rant, which some people love, some people hate. But as per the last video, guys, discuss the points raised in the video. I get sick of seeing responses that have nothing to do with the actual content and don't elaborate. Like, I had one guy say something on the lines of, I can see why people told you to kill yourself. You have to understand that Games Workshop has explained, every Games Workshop has explained this problem or something. And he did not elaborate on what the problem was, didn't elaborate on what they had said, never elaborate on where they had said it. So what use was that comment? Okay, I want to engage with you guys. I want to treat you as my equals because you are. I'm not superior to you because I have a YouTube channel. The only thing that is superior here is that I can see the flaws, and apparently for pointing that out, I'm a bad guy. Yeah, I love how that works. Anyway, back with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching the episode. I do appreciate you coming along. Thanks for being here, and thanks to the good people, which is the majority of you, the 99.9% of you that come onto these videos. You're fantastic, and you do leave some great comments, and I do love reading them. But idiots, I can't do anything about. Thank you all, and I'll see you all on the next one.